Hello, I'm Anna Grace, a 32-year-old English teacher. I cherish books, deep conversations, and the quiet joy of teaching. Every story matters and sometimes life writes the most unexpected ones. They say the classroom is where we shape futures. I never imagined it would reshape mine. I've been teaching literature at Westbridge High for nearly 7 years. At 32, I've built a quiet life: coffee at 6, school by 7:30. Lesson plans, essays, staff meetings, and dinner at home with a book in hand. My students often joke that I was born with a pen in one hand and Shakespeare in the other. I smile, pretend to be amused, and gently correct their grammar when needed. That's the rhythm I lived by, steady, unshaken, until he walked into my classroom. His name is Oliver, 17, brilliant mind, a bit too quiet, the kind of student who hides in the back row but always scores the highest. When he joined my senior English class, he didn't stand out immediately. Not until the day we discussed The Great Gatsby and he challenged my interpretation of the green light. I still remember how he spoke: thoughtful, measured, but with a spark. Maybe Gatsby wasn't chasing Daisy, he said. Maybe he was chasing the idea of perfection. And maybe the green light isn't about hope at all. Maybe it's about illusion. That sentence struck me harder than I'd like to admit. Not because he was right, he was, but because I saw myself in it, chasing an idea of a life I thought I wanted, until I realized I was just drifting. Over the months, our conversations deepened. At first it was just literature: Kafka, Woolf, Baldwin, then philosophy, music, art. He stayed after class often. I told myself it was mentorship. I told myself it was harmless. But late at night, I'd find myself replaying our talks, wondering what it meant that I looked forward to them more than I should. And when he began confiding in me about his estranged father, his love of writing, his fear of being misunderstood, started to feel something shift inside me. Something I wasn't prepared for. I tried to draw the line. I avoided staying alone with him. I stopped replying to his emails too quickly. I reminded myself of my role, my responsibility. But emotions don't obey job descriptions. And one rainy afternoon, everything changed. The rain had been falling since morning, soft and steady. It was the kind of day that made everything feel slower, quieter, like the world had pressed pause. Most students had rushed home by the final bell, but Oliver lingered, as he often did, under the excuse of revising his personal essay for our final unit. "Are you sure you don't mind staying a bit?" he asked, standing by my desk with his notebook clutched tightly in his hands. "No," I said too quickly. Then I corrected myself. "I mean, it's fine. I don't have anywhere to be." He smiled, not the polite, reserved smile he gave in class, but one that felt genuine. It startled me more than it should have. We sat side by side at my desk, red pen in hand, going over his words line by line. His writing had depth. There was a rawness in the way he expressed grief and wonder, fear and hope. I admired it more than I admitted. When our fingers brushed over the same corner of the page, I felt something electric and instantly pulled away, embarrassed by my own reaction. "Are you cold?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, just distracted." There was a silence then, a kind that wasn't uncomfortable, just thick with something unspoken. I glanced up at him, and he was looking at me, not in the way a student looks at a teacher, but with curiosity, maybe something more. "You ever feel like you're meant for something else?" he asked suddenly. "Like you're living the version of your life someone else picked out for you?" His words landed heavily. "Yes," I said before I could stop myself. "All the time." We sat like that for another hour, talking not about assignments, but about life. His parents' divorce, my failed engagement, his love for old movies, my fear of wasting time. By the time we looked up, the school had emptied, and dusk had crept into the windows. "I should go," he said, standing slowly. I nodded. "I'll see you Monday." But as he turned to leave, he paused. "You're easy to talk to, Miss Hartley." I wanted to say thank you, but my throat felt tight. "Anna," I corrected him softly. "When we're not in class, you can call me Anna." He looked surprised, but he smiled. "Okay, Anna." And then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. I sat alone in that quiet room for a long time afterward. My heart was louder than the rain. After that rainy afternoon, I tried to forget the way his voice sounded when he said my name, Anna. It should have meant nothing, just a name, stripped of titles, stripped of formality. But the way he said it, it lingered, like a note that wouldn't fade from a song long finished. That weekend, I buried myself in work. I cleaned my apartment. I reorganized my bookshelf. I meal prepped for the whole week, even though I'd probably throw most of it out. Anything to keep myself from thinking about him. But Monday came, and so did Oliver. He walked into class with that same quiet confidence, sat in his usual seat second from the back, next to the window, and opened his notebook like nothing had changed, and maybe nothing had. Not to anyone else, but to me, everything felt sharper. His presence felt heavier. I caught myself watching him too long during a reading exercise. I knew the line, I knew where it was, and I knew I was dangerously close to it. That afternoon, I met with the principal, Mr. Whitmore, to discuss the end-of-term projects. He praised my students' progress, especially Oliver's gifted kid. That one, he said. You've got a good influence on him. I nodded politely, but his words echoed inside me in a way that made me uncomfortable. Later that night, I received an email, just one line, subject, Gatsby message. Do you think Daisy ever loved him, really? Or was he just the idea of what she wanted love to feel like? I stared at the screen for far too long. I shouldn't have replied. I know that, but I did. Maybe both. Love and illusion aren't always separate things. The next day, he stayed after class again. I liked your answer, he said, as I erased the board. It made me think. Good, I said, keeping my voice neutral. That's what good writing should do. He leaned against the desk. What? If someone makes you feel seen, and it scares you? I turned to him slowly. I think that means you're alive. There was a moment, just a breath of time, where I think we both knew something was shifting. He didn't move closer. He didn't say anything inappropriate, but the air between us changed, and I felt the weight of it. Do you think, he said carefully, that it's possible to feel something you're not supposed to? I should have stopped him. I should have drawn the boundary again, firmly. But instead, I said yes, because it was true. That week passed slowly. I kept trying to convince myself that nothing was happening, that this was just a momentary lapse, a passing thought, a phase that would dissolve if I kept things professional. But feelings aren't polite. They don't wait their turn. They arrive uninvited, and then linger at the door, refusing to leave. On Thursday, the last period was cut short due to a staff meeting. I let my students go early, gathered my things, and walked out under a sky that had turned the color of ash. I didn't expect to see Oliver waiting at the gate. You walk home? He asked, his hands in his coat pockets. Usually, I said. It's not far. I'll walk with you, if that's okay. It wasn't, not really. But I nodded anyway. We walked in silence for a while, the kind of silence that felt strange and safe at the same time. The streets were quiet, lined with trees that were already shedding their leaves. He kicked one gently with his foot as he walked beside me. Can I ask you something personal? He said. You've already asked me a few. He smiled. Fair point. Then he hesitated before speaking again. Have you ever felt older than your life? I looked at him. Every day. He seemed relieved by my answer. It's like everyone around me is doing what they're supposed to. Parties, prom, college apps, but I feel like I'm watching it all through glass. I know that feeling, I said. I felt it when I was your age too. He looked at me not with admiration, but with recognition. That was what made it hard. He wasn't idolizing me. He understood me, and I understood him too well. We reached the corner near my apartment. I stopped. This is me, he nodded. Thanks for walking. Of course, then he said it, quietly. I like talking to you. I looked at him, unsure of what to say. There were so many words I couldn't use. So many things I wasn't allowed to feel. But I said, me too. He stepped back, respectful, as always. See you tomorrow. I watched him walk away, his figure growing smaller with each step. I stood there for a long time, questioning every decision I'd made in the past year, questioning the kind of woman I was becoming. Not because I had done anything, but because I was thinking things I shouldn't, and thoughts are where everything begins. The next few days were calm on the surface. Classes went as usual, assignments rolled in, and I gave lectures with the same energy I always had. But beneath all of it, I was constantly aware of him. I caught myself anticipating the moments when he'd raise his hand or glance my way. I hated how quickly I recognized his footsteps in the hallway, how easily I could tell his voice apart from the others. It wasn't right, and I knew it, but knowing didn't make it stop. One afternoon, I walked into the staff lounge and overheard two younger teachers laughing about a student who had written her a love note. I smiled with them, pretended to be amused, but something about it unsettled me. The way they spoke about the student as if feelings, once felt by someone younger, were automatically foolish or meaningless. I didn't agree, and that realization shook me. That night, I received a short message from Oliver. Subject: Jane Eyre message. Do you think Jane loved Mr. Rochester because he saw her, or in spite of the fact that he did? I stared at the screen, heart thudding. These emails had become a quiet ritual between us, a hidden place where words became safer than feelings. I replied, I think she loved him, because he saw the parts of her she didn't think were worth noticing. The reply came minutes later. That's how I feel when I talk to you. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark, overwhelmed. Not just by the words, but by the honesty behind them. The weight of that admission. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't inappropriate. It was something more dangerous real. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, he arrived early to class. No one else was there yet. He stood at the door, hesitant, until I waved him in. I brought you something, he said, reaching into his backpack. He handed me a small book thin, bound in soft leather. I opened it. His poems handwritten. I don't show these to people, he said, but I want you to read them. Looked at him, unsure what to say. This wasn't a gift. It was trust, offered without condition. I'll take care of them, I said. Thank you. That day, I read every page during lunch. His words were raw, beautiful, and a little heartbreaking. Some of the poems were about feeling lost. Others were about feeling found in unexpected places. One in particular stopped me. I sat in a room full of noise but heard only her voice, the one that told me I wasn't too much or too little, just enough to be noticed. That evening I wrote him a note. Just one line. You see the world in a way most people your age don't. Never stop writing. I didn't sign it. I left it inside the book and returned it the next day without a word. He smiled when he found it, but said nothing. That silence said everything. After I gave the book back, things between us shifted again subtly, but undeniably. He didn't say anything about the note I left, and I didn't ask. But from that day on, there was something unspoken between us. Not tension, not quite. Something softer, like an understanding that didn't need words. He still stayed after class sometimes, but not every day. And when he did, our conversations were shorter, more careful. I think we both knew we were nearing a place we shouldn't go. And yet, there was a quiet comfort in our connections that felt more like reflection than infatuation. I saw myself in him, and maybe he saw himself in me. One day in late April, he asked if he could walk me home again. I hesitated, but nodded. It was sunny this time, no rain to hide behind. We talked about nothing important: books, the senior project, his plans for college. He'd been accepted to a university across the state, known for its creative writing program. You're going to do well there, I said. You have a voice. Thanks to you, he said. No, I corrected him. Thanks to you, I only encouraged it. We stopped again at the same corner. He looked at me carefully. What if we had met at a different time? My heart dropped. That's not the question that matters, I said gently. He didn't argue, he just nodded. I know. I just think about it sometimes. I wanted to tell him I did too. But I did in single quotes t. instead. I said, some people come into your life not to stay, but to change its direction. He smiled at that. You're good with words. So are you. He stepped back again, just like before. See you Monday. See you. He walked away without turning back this time. I stood at the corner, blinking against the sun, feeling something inside me settle into a quiet ache. That weekend, I thought a lot about boundaries, not just the professional ones, but the emotional ones. The truth was, I hadn't crossed any lines, not on paper. But inside me, it was different. I'd grown attached. I cared about him not just as a student, but as a person. And maybe more than I was willing to admit. I wasn't ashamed of the feelings, but I knew I couldn't nurture them. When Monday came, I handed him a sealed envelope. No name on the outside. Just a folded letter, short and careful. He read it during lunch, then returned it to my desk before the last bell. We didn't speak of it again. Inside that letter, I had written, "Some connections aren't meant to become anything else. That doesn't make them less real. Thank you for seeing me." After the letter, everything grew quieter between us. Oliver didn't stay after class anymore. He still answered questions with the same insight, still handed in perfect assignments, still smiled when we passed in the hallway, but it was different. We had stepped back, gently, respectfully, like two people who had wandered too close to the edge and chosen to turn around before it was too late. I missed our conversations, though I never said it, but I also felt a sense of peace. We had honored what we felt without letting it ruin us. As the school year wound down, the hallways filled with the buzz of prom plans, capan gown fittings, and countdowns to summer. I watched my students grow lighter with each passing day, excited for the lives waiting just beyond graduation. It was bittersweet, watching them prepare to leave, especially him. One afternoon, I found a small envelope on my desk. Inside was a handwritten thank you card. No signature, just a line. "You helped me find my voice. I'll carry that with me." I didn't need a name. I recognized the handwriting instantly. That night, I cried not out of sadness or regret, but out of gratitude. Some stories don't need an ending to be meaningful. Some people pass through our lives like seasons, brief but unforgettable. On the last day of school, I stood by my classroom door, saying goodbye to each student as they handed in their final papers. Oliver was one of the last. He handed me his work, paused, then said softly, "Thank you for everything." I nodded. "Take care of yourself, Oliver." He hesitated for a breath. "I'll try." And then he was gone. Just like that. I sat in my empty classroom long after the halls went silent. I looked at the stack of final papers, but I didn't read them. Not yet. I needed a moment to feel what that year had meant. Because the truth is, I didn't fall in love with a student. I fell in love with being seen. And he just happened to be the one who saw me at the right moment in my life, when I had forgotten how to feel anything at all. That doesn't make it wrong, but it does make it impossible. It's been 3 years now. I still teach English, though at a different school in a different town. Smaller classes, quieter halls, the kind of place where the days blend gently together. Sometimes I wonder if I moved to run away from something. Maybe I did, but it doesn't feel like running anymore. It feels like growth. I've never spoken to anyone about Oliver. Not really. Not in full. A few colleagues knew we were close in that mentor-student kind of way. One even joked once, "He was your favorite, wasn't he?" I smiled and shrugged. What could I say? Because he was, yes, but not in the way they thought. I never crossed a line, but I stood close enough to see where it was drawn. I still think about him, sometimes. When I read a poem that has too much truth in it. When a student hands in something raw and beautiful. When I hear someone speak with a voice they didn't know they had until someone gave them permission. And in those moments, I remember how important it is to be the kind of teacher who listens, who sees, who offers a safe place for young minds to unfold. But I also remember how easy it is to blur the edges of connection when your own heart is lonely. What happened between us wasn't a scandal. It wasn't a mistake. It was a quiet season in my life where someone younger reminded me of who I used to be and how much of her I had lost. And maybe, just maybe, I did the same for him. We were never lovers, never anything but two souls passing each other at the wrong time with open eyes and unguarded hearts. And sometimes, that's more powerful than anything else. If I ever saw him again, I wouldn't apologize. I would just say, "Thank you for the light and the honesty. You reminded me I was still alive." And I hope wherever he is, he's still writing, still finding meaning in small things, still seeing people the way he once saw me.